Captain Jake Morrison stood in the control room of his ship and looked out at the stars. His ship was called the USS Nightfall, and it was very special. No other ship in the human fleet could do what his ship could do. The Nightfall could become invisible. Not just hard to see, but completely invisible to enemy sensors and eyes. Jake had been the captain of this ship for 2 years now. He was 35 years old and had served in the human space navy for 15 years. He had seen many battles against the aliens who wanted to destroy humanity. These aliens were called the Zephyrians, and they looked like tall creatures made of living crystal. They had been attacking human colonies for 3 years now and winning most of the fights. The Nightfall was floating in empty space between 2 star systems. They had been here for 3 weeks now and nobody knew they were there. The ship used something called shadow field technology that bent light around the hull. When the shadow field was active, no sensors could detect them and no eyes could see them. They were like a ghost ship drifting through space. Lisa Carter was sitting at her station watching the sensor displays. She was the second in command of the ship and very good at her job. Lisa was 28 years old and had been working on stealth ships for 4 years. She knew how to read enemy movements and predict where they would go next. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "I am seeing movement on the long-range sensors. Looks like a big group of Zephyrian ships heading toward the Kepler system." Jake walked over to look at her screen. The display showed 12 large enemy ships moving in formation. These were heavy battle cruisers, and each one could destroy a human colony by itself. The Kepler system had 2 million human settlers who would not be able to defend themselves against this attack. "How many ships total?" Jake asked. 12 heavy cruisers and maybe 20 smaller escort ships, Lisa replied. "They are moving fast and will reach Kepler in 6 hours. Jake thought about this for a moment. His ship was powerful, but not powerful enough to fight 32 enemy ships by itself. The Nightfall had weapons that could destroy any single enemy ship, but there were too many of them. If he attacked now, he would save the colony, but his ship would be destroyed and his crew would die. But Jake had different orders. His mission was not to save colonies. His mission was much more important than that. The Nightfall was part of a secret plan that could end the war against the Zephyrians, a plan that nobody except the highest commanders knew about. Danny Brooks was working at the engineering station making sure the shadow field stayed active. Danny was the best engineer in the human fleet and the only person who really understood how the new technology worked. He was 42 years old and had been building ships since he was 20. The shadow field generators were very complex and could break down if not watched carefully. "How are the generators looking, Danny?" Jake asked. "Running smooth, Captain," Danny replied. "We can stay invisible for another 2 weeks if needed, but I would not want to push it longer than that." Jake nodded. The shadow field technology was still new and sometimes failed at the worst moments. 3 other ships with this technology had been lost when their stealth systems stopped working during battles. The crews had died when enemy ships suddenly could see them and fired all weapons at once. Amy Rodriguez was monitoring enemy communications from her station. Amy was 25 years old and spoke 7 different languages, including the crystal language that the Zephyrians used. She could listen to their radio signals and understand their battle plans. "Captain," Amy said, "the enemy ships are talking to each other about their attack plans. They think the humans at Kepler have no defenses and this will be an easy victory. They are not expecting any resistance." Jake felt angry hearing this, but he kept his emotions controlled. He had learned long ago that good captains never let feelings make their decisions. The people at Kepler would have to take care of themselves. His ship had a more important job to do. The Zephyrian fleet passed by the Nightfall at a distance of only 50,000 kilometers. The enemy ships were huge and beautiful in a strange way. Their crystal hulls glowed with internal light, and they moved through space like living things. But Jake knew these beautiful ships were filled with aliens who wanted to kill every human in the galaxy. "Maintain silent running," Jake ordered. "Let them pass, we have bigger targets to hunt." Tony Hamilton was the weapons officer and he wanted to attack the enemy ships. Tony was 30 years old and had lost his family when aliens destroyed his home colony. He hated the Zephyrians and wanted to kill as many as possible. "Captain, we could take out at least 3 of their ships before they knew what hit them," Tony said. "No," Jake replied firmly. "Our orders are clear. We wait for the signal." Amy received a coded message on her communications equipment. She read it carefully and then turned to face Jake with excitement in her eyes. "Captain," Amy said, "priority message from Earth Command. Operation Ghost Strike is approved. All shadow ships are ordered to begin hunting." Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. Operation Ghost Strike was the secret plan that would change everything. For 3 years, the humans had been running and hiding from the Zephyrian fleets. The aliens thought humans were weak and stupid. They thought the war would be over soon. But the aliens did not know about the shadow ships. They did not know that 17 invisible human ships were now scattered across their territory. Ships that could appear from nowhere and disappear like smoke. Ships with new weapons that could punch through any alien shield or armor. "Lisa, plot a course for the Arcturus system," Jake ordered. "Danny, keep those generators running perfect. Tony, start charging the plasma lance weapons. Amy, send confirmation to Earth Command that we received the message." The crew began preparing for battle with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this mission for 2 years and everybody knew their job. The Nightfall turned away from the Kepler system and headed deeper into enemy territory, where bigger prizes waited. Jake looked out at the stars one more time before the battle began. In a few hours, the Zephyrians would learn that humans were not prey animals. They were predators, and the hunt was about to begin. Admiral Patricia Wells stood in the war room deep under the surface of Earth and studied the 3-dimensional map floating in front of her. The map showed every star system within 200 light-years of Earth and marked where enemy fleets were located with red dots. There were too many red dots and not enough blue ones. Patricia was 53 years old and had been fighting aliens for most of her adult life. She had seen the Zephyrians destroy colony after colony while human fleets ran away or got wiped out trying to fight. But now everything was going to change. The shadow ships were ready and the aliens had no idea what was coming. The war room was filled with the best military officers humanity had to offer. These were people who had survived battles that killed most of their friends. They were smart and tough and willing to do whatever it took to win this war. Around the walls were screens showing real-time information from across human space. Colonel Ryan Foster walked over to stand beside Patricia at the map display. Ryan was her chief tactical officer and one of the few people she trusted completely. He was 41 years old and had been planning battles since he was 25. Ryan understood how aliens thought and could predict their moves before they made them. "Admiral," Ryan said quietly, "our scout ships report that the enemy is moving their fleets into position for a final push toward Earth. They have over 800 ships gathered in staging areas and more coming every day." Patricia nodded as she studied the enemy positions. The Zephyrians thought they had humans trapped. Their fleets were spread out across dozens of systems, but they were all moving toward the same goal. They wanted to destroy Earth and end the human species once and for all. "How confident are they?" Patricia asked. "Very confident," Ryan replied. "Our intelligence sources say their emperor has already planned his victory celebration. They think this war will be over within 6 months." Patricia smiled coldly. The aliens were right that the war would be over soon, but they were wrong about who would win. The shadow ships would teach them that humans were much more dangerous than they looked. Dr. Helen Murphy approached the command table carrying a data pad with technical information. Helen was the chief scientist who had developed the shadow field technology that made the stealth ships possible. She was 38 years old and probably the smartest person on Earth when it came to advanced physics. "Admiral," Helen said, "all 17 shadow ships are reporting their stealth systems are working perfectly. The field generators can keep them invisible for extended periods without any problems. Enemy sensors cannot detect them even at close range." "What about the new weapons?" Patricia asked. "The plasma lance cannons have exceeded all performance expectations," Helen replied with excitement. "Each shadow ship carries enough firepower to destroy a Zephyrian dreadnought with a single volley. The focused plasma beams can punch through their strongest shields and armor like they are made of paper." Patricia was pleased to hear this. The plasma lance weapons had taken 5 years to develop and used technology that no alien species possessed. When the beams hit an enemy ship, they would heat the target to over 1 million degrees in less than a second. Nothing could survive that kind of attack. General Mike Cooper joined the group at the command table. Mike was in charge of all ground forces and had been fighting aliens on planets across human space. He was 47 years old and had scars on his face from battles on colony worlds that were now just memories and graves. "Admiral," Mike said, "the enemy ground forces are preparing for invasion fleets. They expect to start landing troops on human worlds within 3 months. Our people are scared, and some colonies are talking about surrender." Patricia understood why people were afraid. For 3 years, every news report had been about defeats and retreating fleets. Most humans thought the war was already lost, and it was just a matter of time before the aliens reached Earth. But those people did not know about the shadow ships. "General," Patricia said, "in 72 hours, every human in the galaxy will know that we are not defeated. The aliens will learn that attacking us was the biggest mistake they ever made." Captain Steve Johnson was the liaison officer from the Shadow Ship program. Steve had commanded the first stealth ship ever built and helped train all the other captains. He was 36 years old and understood the capabilities of the Invisible Fleet better than anyone except the crews themselves. "Admiral," Steve said, "all shadow ship captains are in position and ready to begin operations. They have been studying enemy movements for weeks and know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The aliens will not know what hit them." Patricia looked around the room at all the officers and scientists who had worked so hard to make this moment possible. For years they had been planning and building and training, while the aliens thought humans were almost finished. The Zephyrians believed they were hunting weak prey animals, but they were about to learn the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia announced to everyone in the war room, "today we stop running and start hunting. The aliens think they know everything about human capabilities, but they are wrong. We have been hiding our real strength and letting them become overconfident." She activated the communication system that would send her voice to every shadow ship scattered across enemy territory. 17 captains and their crews were waiting for the order that would begin the counterattack. "Attention all shadow ship commanders," Patricia said into the microphone. "This is Admiral Wells with Operation Ghost Strike authorization. You are cleared to begin hunting operations immediately. Target priority is command ships first, then carriers, and supply vessels. Make every shot count and remember that you are the tip of the spear." The responses came back quickly from captains who had been waiting weeks for this moment. Jake Morrison from the Nightfall, Susan Davis from the Phantom, Paul Martinez from the Spectre, and 14 others, all of them ready to show the aliens that humans were not going to die quietly. Helen Murphy pulled up technical displays showing the location of every shadow ship. They were spread across 12 different star systems deep in enemy territory. The aliens had no idea that invisible human ships were floating right next to their fleets. "The first attacks will begin in approximately 4 hours, Helen reported. "By the time the aliens figure out what is happening, it will be too late for them to react effectively." Patricia studied the tactical display and imagined what was about to happen. Alien command ships would suddenly explode for no reason that enemy sensors could detect. Supply convoys would vanish in balls of plasma fire. Fleet commanders would find themselves blind and unable to coordinate their forces. "Colonel Foster," Patricia ordered, "prepare all conventional fleets for follow-up operations. Once the shadow ships have disrupted enemy formations, we will move in with everything we have." Ryan nodded and began sending orders to fleet commanders across human space. Ships that had been hiding and running for years would finally get the chance to fight back. The aliens would discover that humans had many more ships than they thought. The countdown to Operation Ghost Strike had begun, and there was no turning back now. In a few hours, the Zephyrian Empire would learn that they had made a terrible mistake when they decided to hunt humanity. The galaxy was about to discover that humans were not prey animals at all. They were apex predators, and the real war was just beginning. The Zephyrian command ship Stellar Dominance floated in space like a massive crystal cathedral. The ship was over 2 kilometers long, and its translucent hull glowed with soft blue light from the inside. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge looking at reports from his fleet commanders. Everything was going exactly as planned, and the humans would be extinct within months. Kethvar was one of the most successful military leaders in Zephyrian history. He had conquered 15 different species and added their worlds to the empire. The crystal being was over 300 years old and had never lost a major battle. He thought humans were the weakest enemies he had ever faced. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, The forward fleets have destroyed 3 more human colonies in the past week. Total resistance was minimal, and casualties were light. The humans appear to be retreating toward their core systems. Kethvar was pleased with this news. The war was proceeding faster than expected, and soon he would have the honor of destroying Earth itself. The Crystal Admiral looked forward to adding humanity to his long list of extinct species. What Kethvar did not know was that the USS Nightfall had been following his command ship for 6 hours. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew had been studying the alien vessel and planning their attack with careful precision. The shadow field generators kept them completely invisible while they moved into position. "Target analysis complete, Captain," reported Lisa Carter from her sensor station. "The enemy command ship has heavy shields, but they are designed to stop conventional weapons. Our plasma lances should punch right through them." Jake studied the tactical display showing the alien ship from every angle. The Stellar Dominance was heavily armed with dozens of crystal cannons that could destroy any normal human ship. But the Nightfall was not a normal ship, and the aliens had never seen weapons like plasma lances before. "Tony," Jake said to his weapons officer, "how long to charge the main batteries?" Tony Hamilton checked his displays and ran calculations in his head. The plasma lance cannons were the most powerful weapons ever built by humans, but they took time to build up enough energy for a killing shot. 90 seconds for full charge, Captain," Tony replied. "But we can fire at 60% power in 30 seconds if needed." "No," Jake said firmly. "We only get one surprise attack, make it count. Full power." Danny Brooks monitored the shadow field generators while the weapons charged. The stealth system was working perfectly, but firing the plasma lances would create massive energy signatures that might be detected. They would have maybe 10 seconds of invisibility after the attack, before enemy sensors could track them. "Captain," Danny reported, "the shadow field is stable, but firing will strain the generators. We can maintain stealth for about 15 seconds after the attack, then we need to go dark and recharge." Amy Rodriguez was listening to enemy communications and translating what the aliens were saying. The Zephyrians were completely relaxed and confident. They had no idea that death was floating invisible just 5,000 kilometers away from their command ship. "Enemy communications indicate they are planning the next phase of attacks," Amy reported. "They intend to strike the Centauri colonies tomorrow and expect no resistance." Jake felt cold anger hearing this, but he kept his emotions under control. The aliens thought humans were helpless animals waiting to be slaughtered. In 60 seconds, they would learn how wrong they were. "Weapons charged and ready, Captain," Tony announced, targeting the enemy bridge and command sections. "Fire," Jake ordered. The USS Nightfall dropped her shadow field for exactly 3 seconds as the plasma lance cannons fired. Twin beams of superheated energy erupted from the human ship and crossed the distance to the alien vessel at the speed of light. The focused plasma was hotter than the core of a star, and nothing could withstand that kind of power. The Stellar Dominance had shields that could stop missiles and energy beams from any known weapon. But plasma lances were completely unknown, technology that used principles the aliens had never encountered. The beams passed through the shields like they were not there, and struck the crystal hull with devastating force. Admiral Kethvar was reading casualty reports when his entire world exploded around him. The plasma beams hit the command bridge and instantly vaporized everything they touched. The crystal hull cracked and shattered as superheated gas expanded through the ship's interior spaces. Emergency alarms screamed as atmosphere vented into space through massive holes. "What happened?" Kethvar managed to ask before a falling beam crushed his legs. The bridge was filled with smoke and the smell of burning crystal. Half of his crew was dead, and the other half was trying to figure out what had attacked them. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, "massive energy discharge detected but no enemy ships visible on sensors. Unknown weapon type. Damage to all forward sections and life support failing." The USS Nightfall re-engaged her stealth field and vanished from normal space before the aliens could react. Jake watched the enemy command ship through his viewports as it slowly broke apart. Internal explosions sent pieces of crystal hull spinning away into the darkness. "Direct hit on their command center," Tony reported with satisfaction. "Their ship is finished and they will not be coordinating any more attacks." "Move to secondary targets," Jake ordered. and re-engage full stealth. The Nightfall was not the only shadow ship attacking today. Across the star system, 16 other invisible ships were striking simultaneously at carefully chosen targets. The USS Phantom had been stalking 2 enemy aircraft carriers for hours, and Captain Susan Davis was ready to attack. "Weapons ready, Captain," her tactical officer reported. "Both carriers are launching fighter squadrons." "Fire on the lead carrier," Susan ordered, "then immediately target the second one." The Phantom's plasma lances destroyed the first Zephyrian carrier in a single volley. The alien ship simply vanished in a ball of superheated gas before anyone could react. The second carrier tried to turn away, but it was too late. Another plasma strike reduced it to expanding debris and glowing vapor. Captain Paul Martinez commanded the USS Spectre and had been assigned to destroy a supply convoy. The alien cargo ships were huge, slow targets that could not fight back effectively. Paul felt almost sorry for them as his weapons locked on. "Target the command ship first, then work down the line," Paul ordered his crew. The supply convoy died quickly as invisible death struck from every direction. 12 cargo ships loaded with weapons and ammunition for the alien invasion vanished one by one. The explosions lit up space for millions of kilometers as stored ordnance detonated. Similar attacks were happening throughout the system as shadow ships struck at targets they had been watching for weeks. Communication relay stations went silent. Sensor networks simply stopped working. Repair facilities exploded without warning. The entire alien fleet found itself blind and unable to coordinate. "Captain," Lisa Carter reported to Jake, "enemy communications are in complete chaos. They are calling for help but do not know what they are fighting or where the attacks are coming from." Jake smiled coldly as he watched another enemy ship explode. In the distance, the aliens had spent 3 years hunting humans across the galaxy, and now they were learning what it felt like to be prey animals themselves. "Set course for the next target zone," Jake ordered. "We have a lot more hunting to do." The USS Nightfall turned away from the burning wreckage of the stellar dominance and headed for another star system where alien ships waited. The first phase of Operation Ghost Strike was complete, and the Zephyrian Empire was about to discover that the war had taken a very different turn. The final battle took place in the empty void between the stars where no planets existed and no life had ever grown. This was where the Zephyrian Grand Armada had chosen to gather before their final assault on Earth. Over 400 crystal ships hung in perfect formation like artificial stars against the darkness of space. Emperor Zekthul had come personally to command this battle from his flagship, Eternal Glory. The massive vessel was 5 kilometers long and contained more firepower than entire human fleets. The Crystal Emperor wanted to watch personally as the last resistance of humanity was crushed forever. Admiral Vexithan, the Emperor commanded from his crystal throne, report on fleet status and readiness for the attack on Earth. Vexithan studied the tactical displays showing hundreds of ships arranged in precise battle formations. Every vessel was at full combat readiness with weapons charged and shields raised. The combined firepower represented here could destroy entire solar systems. "Your Imperial Majesty," Vexthon reported, "all fleets are assembled and ready for combat operations. We have 427 major warships plus escorts. Our sensors show no human vessels anywhere in the area. Space appears to be completely empty." But space was not empty. 17 shadow ships drifted like ghosts through the alien formation, completely invisible to every sensor and detection system the Empire possessed. The crews worked in deadly silence as they prepared for the most important battle in human history. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Nightfall and watched enemy ships pass by just kilometers away. The crystal vessels were beautiful and terrible at the same time with their glowing hulls and deadly weapons. Each one contained enough firepower to sterilize a planet, but none of them knew death was floating invisibly all around them. "All shadow ships, this is Admiral Wells," came the encrypted transmission from Earth. "You are humanity's last hope. The conventional fleets are in position for follow-up attacks, but everything depends on you disrupting their formation first. Target their command ships and carriers, then hit anything that looks important." Lisa Carter tracked enemy positions from her sensor station while marking priority targets for attack. The Zephyrian fleet was spread across thousands of cubic kilometers, but their command structure was concentrated in the center, where the largest ships waited. "Captain," Lisa reported quietly, "I count 12 super dreadnoughts including the Emperor's flagship. If we can take out their command vessels, the rest of the fleet will lose coordination." Tony Hamilton had been studying the enemy ships for hours and calculating firing solutions for maximum damage. The plasma lance weapons were charged and ready, but each shadow ship would only get one surprise attack before the aliens figured out where the shots were coming from. "Weapon systems ready, Captain," Tony reported. "All plasma lances charged to full power. Targeting computers have lock on the enemy flagship and 6 escort vessels." Danny Brooks monitored the shadow field generators that were running far beyond their design limits. The stealth technology was holding together but barely, and he could see stress fractures forming in the crystal matrices that focused the distortion field. "Captain," Danny warned, "the generators are failing. We have maybe 10 minutes of stealth capability left, then the system will shut down automatically to prevent explosion." Jake made his decision quickly. 10 minutes would have to be enough time to complete their mission and change the course of history. After that, they would fight in the open like conventional warships until they won or died trying. "All shadow ships, this is Nightfall Actual," Jake transmitted to the other invisible vessels scattered through the enemy formation. "Commence Operation Final Dawn. Execute simultaneous attack on all priority targets. Make every shot count." The space around the Zephyrian armada suddenly erupted with brilliant flashes of plasma fire as 17 invisible attackers struck from every direction at once. The Emperor's flagship shuddered under multiple hits as plasma lances punched through shields and armor like they were made of paper. Emperor Zek Thul felt his mighty ship shake as explosions tore through the forward hull sections. The crystal throne room filled with smoke and the sound of emergency alarms. Half the bridge crew was killed in the first seconds as superheated plasma vaporized everything it touched. "What is happening?" the Emperor demanded as his ship continued to take hits from an enemy that could not be seen. "The humans, Your Majesty," Admiral Vexthon shouted over the noise of battle. "They are attacking from all directions, but our sensors cannot detect any ships. The weapons are coming from empty space." The USS Phantom, commanded by Captain Susan Davis, had targeted 3 enemy carriers and destroyed all of them in less than 30 seconds. The alien ships simply vanished in balls of expanding gas as plasma beams heated their hulls beyond the melting point of any known material. Captain Paul Martinez of the USS Spectre concentrated his attack on the fleet communication hub and managed to destroy the main relay ship before it could send warning signals. Suddenly, half the Zephyrian fleet found itself unable to coordinate with the other half, but the shadow field generators were failing across the human fleet. One by one, the stealth ships began to materialize in normal space as their cloaking systems overloaded from extended use under combat conditions. The USS Ghost appeared first, followed by the Wraith and then the Phantom. "Captain," Danny Brooks called out, "shadow field is destabilizing rapidly. We are becoming visible." Jake saw his ship begin to shimmer as the stealth field flickered in and out of existence. Around the battle area, other shadow ships were appearing as their generators failed. The element of surprise was gone, but the damage had already been done. "All power to weapons," Jake ordered. "If we are going to be visible, then we fight like our ancestors did. No retreat and no surrender." The USS Nightfall appeared fully in normal space, just as the Eternal Glory brought its main weapons to bear. The flagship's crystal cannons fired beams of focused energy that could slice through any conventional armor. But Jake was not flying a conventional ship. "Evasive maneuvers," Jake shouted. "Return fire on their bridge." Tony Hamilton targeted the Emperor's command section and fired everything the ship had. The plasma lances struck the crystal palace where Zek Thul sat on his throne, and the entire structure cracked like glass struck by a hammer. Emperor Zek Thul felt his throne room breaking apart around him as the human weapons continued their assault. The crystal walls that had protected him for 1,000 years were melting under the intense heat of the plasma beams. His own body was cracking as temperatures rose beyond what any living crystal could withstand. "Retreat," the Emperor managed to transmit before his flagship broke completely apart. "All ships retreat immediately. These humans are not what we believed. They are not prey animals. They are apex predators." The surviving Zephyrian vessels fled, in complete disorder, leaving behind the wreckage of their once mighty armada. Over half the Imperial fleet had been destroyed or crippled by just 17 human ships. The Crystal Empire that had conquered dozens of species had been broken by creatures they thought were primitive and weak. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his damaged bridge and watched the enemy ships running away in panic. The USS Nightfall was heavily damaged and would need months of repairs, but they had accomplished something that seemed impossible. They had defeated the largest military force ever assembled in this part of the galaxy. Of the 17 shadow ships that began the battle, only 6 were still operational. 11 crews had died to save humanity, but their sacrifice had changed everything. The war was not over, but the balance of power had shifted completely. Communications, Jake ordered. Send message to all human fleets. The shadow ships have opened the door. Time for the conventional Navy to finish what we started. Admiral Patricia Wells received the message in her underground command center and smiled for the first time in years. The hidden human fleets that had been waiting in asteroid fields and nebulae began moving towards Zephyrian territory. Over 200 warships that the aliens never knew existed were about to begin hunting the retreating enemy. The age of humanity, being hunted across the galaxy, was over. The shadow ships had revealed the true nature of the human species to every alien empire within 100 light years. Humans were not weak prey animals waiting to be slaughtered. They were intelligent predators who learned from every defeat and came back stronger than before. In the years that followed, the mere rumor of human shadow ships would be enough to make entire alien fleets change course rather than risk battle. The galaxy had learned that attacking humanity was the most dangerous mistake any species could make. High Admiral Vexthan stood before the crystal throne in the heart of the Zephyrian Imperial Palace and tried to hide his fear. The massive chamber was carved from a single piece of living crystal that pulsed with rainbow colors. At the center of the room sat Emperor Zekthul, whose crystalline body glowed with angry red light. Vexthan was the supreme commander of all Zephyrian military forces and had served the Empire for over 400 years. He had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire species, but in the past week something impossible had been happening and his carefully planned war against humanity was falling apart. "Explain to me." The Emperor's voice echoed through the crystal formations. "How an entire battle fleet can be destroyed by enemies that do not exist." The Emperor was over 1,000 years old and had ruled the Crystal Empire since before humans had learned to make fire. His species had conquered most of this part of the galaxy through superior technology and overwhelming force. No enemy had ever defeated them in open battle. "Your Imperial Majesty," Vexthan began carefully, "the humans have developed some form of advanced stealth technology. Our sensors cannot detect their vessels until after they attack, and by then it is too late to respond." "Impossible," the Emperor replied with anger filling his voice. "The humans are barely capable of traveling between stars. They lack the scientific knowledge to create such systems. Our intelligence reports indicate they are primitive creatures with crude technology." But even as the Emperor spoke, reports continued flowing in from across the Empire. The Arcturus fleet had lost its command ship and 12 escorts to invisible attackers. A major supply depot in the Vega system had been completely destroyed. 3 research stations had gone silent after mysterious explosions. Fleet Admiral Kolmar entered the Baor throne chamber carrying data tablets with the latest casualty reports. Kolmar commanded the home defense fleets and was responsible for protecting the core worlds of the Empire. His crystal face showed worry that would have been impossible just weeks ago. "Your Imperial Majesty," Kolmar reported, "we have now confirmed attacks by invisible ships in 17 different star systems. Total losses include 43 major warships and over 200 support vessels. The pattern of attacks suggests coordinated strikes by multiple enemy units." Emperor Zekthul rose from his throne and walked to the great viewing window that looked out at the Imperial fleet anchorage. Hundreds of crystal ships floated in perfect formation around the capital world. Each ship represented centuries of advanced engineering and contained enough firepower to destroy entire planets. "How many ships do we estimate the humans possess with this stealth capability?" the Emperor asked. Intelligence analysis suggests between 15 and 20 vessels, Vexthon replied. But we cannot be certain since we have never actually seen one of their ships during an attack. The Emperor considered this information while studying his fleet through the crystal window. 20 invisible ships should not be able to threaten an empire that controlled over 300 star systems. But those 20 ships had already caused more damage than any enemy in Zephyrian history. Meanwhile, in the Proxima system, Captain Jake Morrison was reading new mission orders aboard the USS Nightfall. The shadow ships had been striking at enemy targets for 6 days, and the aliens were finally beginning to understand the scope of the threat they faced. Change of mission, Jake announced to his crew. Intelligence reports that the Zephyrians are pulling back their scattered fleets and massing everything they have for a final assault on Earth. All shadow ships are ordered to rendezvous at coordinates 77 Alpha for a coordinated strike. Lisa Carter plotted the new course while studying long-range sensor data. The enemy was moving hundreds of ships toward human space, and this would be the largest space battle in galactic history. The shadow ships would be outnumbered by more than 20 to 1. Captain, Lisa reported, enemy fleet strength is estimated at over 400 major warships plus escorts. That is more firepower than has ever been assembled in one place. Jake nodded grimly. The aliens were bringing everything they had for this final battle. If the shadow ships failed, then Earth would be destroyed and humanity would be extinct within months. There would be no second chances, and no retreating from this fight. Danny Brooks looked up from his engineering station with concern on his face. The shadow field generators had been running constantly for over a week and were showing signs of stress. The technology was still experimental and had never been tested under combat conditions for extended periods. Captain, Danny reported, we have been pushing the stealth system beyond design limits. The field generators are overheating and power fluctuations are getting worse. I estimate we have maybe 12 more hours of continuous stealth operation before we risk complete system failure. How long would it take to repair the generators if they failed? Jake asked. Assuming we could find a safe place to work and had access to spare parts, maybe 6 hours, Danny replied. But if the system fails during combat, we would be visible to every enemy sensor in the area. Jake considered this carefully. 12 hours. Would have to be enough time to reach the rendezvous point and complete their mission. After that, it would not matter if the stealth system worked because the war would either be won or lost. Back on the Zephyrian capital world, Emperor Zekthol was meeting with his top military commanders to plan the final assault on human space. The crystal beings had decided that the invisible ship problem could only be solved by destroying the source. If Earth was reduced to radioactive ash, then the stealth ships would have nowhere to return for supplies and repairs. Admiral Vexthon, the Emperor commanded, assemble every available warship for immediate deployment to the Sol system. I want overwhelming force brought to bear against the human homeworld. These invisible ships will not matter when their entire species is extinct. Your Imperial Majesty, Vexthon replied, that will leave our core systems defended only by planetary defense networks. If the humans have more ships than we think, they could strike at our homeworlds while our fleets are away. The humans have no ships except for these invisible raiders, the Emperor said with confidence. Our intelligence is very clear on this point. They lost most of their conventional fleet in the early phases of the war and have been running ever since. But the Emperor was wrong about human fleet strength. Admiral Patricia Wells had been hiding over 200 conventional warships in asteroid fields and nebulae across human space. These ships had been waiting for months while the shadow ships prepared the battlefield. Colonel Foster, Patricia, ordered from the underground command center, begin moving all hidden fleets toward their attack positions. When the aliens mass their forces for the assault on Earth, we will hit their supply lines and rear areas with everything we have. Ryan Foster smiled as he sent coded orders to fleet commanders who had been waiting for this moment. The Zephyrians thought they knew where all the human ships were, but they had been looking at carefully planted false intelligence. The real human fleet was much larger than anyone suspected. On board the USS Nightfall, Jake received confirmation that all 17 shadow ships were heading for the final battle. The invisible fleet would make one last coordinated attack against impossible odds. If they succeeded, then humanity would survive. If they failed, Then Earth would burn, and the human species would join the long list of races conquered by the Crystal Empire. Set course for the rendezvous coordinates, Jake ordered. Maximum speed and maintain full stealth. We have a date with Destiny, and we cannot be late. The Nightfall turned toward the void between stars where the largest space battle in galactic history would soon begin. Behind them, the Zephyrian Empire was marshaling every ship they possessed for what they believed would be the final victory. Neither side fully understood what the other was capable of, but both were about to find out in the most decisive way possible.